I think gravity is really emblematic of the completion of a lot of concepts of virtual production coming together. A lot of people talk about how it was so collaborative between all the different departments. Another key thing is that they actually had to invert the production process a bit to figure out the lighting and run, global illumination renderings in Arnold before they even did principal photography, because they had to figure out what light would be on the actors' faces so they could play it back on the LEDs, which is pretty revolutionary. And also, unlike some other visual effects movies that have been well lauded recently, where there's a lot of computer graphics in them, the cinematographer of all the live action was also intimately involved in the cinematography of the computer graphics. And it's technically the same discipline, carried out with different tools, but that hasn't always been the case. Sometimes the cinematographer pays a lot of attention to what's going on in principal photography, and then all the lighting of all the CG, which could even be 2/3 of the movie, is done more by the visual effects supervisor and the visual effects artist. Not necessarily badly, sometimes very beautifully, but it's better if the cinematographer is signing authorship to the lighting design of the film, is involved all the way through, and Emmanuel Debevec did a gorgeous job of all of that. Gravity isn't the first movie to surround actors with computer-controlled LEDs to match the lighting on them to light of virtual environments or to sets that they weren't actually in. The first test that we did of that for a movie was for The Social Network, when Armie Hammer was rowing a boat, and he had to be both of the Winklevoss twins, both the one in the front and the one in the back. So they actually brought Armie Hammer over to our laboratory. They had HDRI maps of the light that should have been on his face if he were sitting in the back of the boat, and we could play that back on him as he performed the scene and then map that face back on. And Lola Visual Effects implemented those techniques in their own pipelines, and they actually did the shot that way and went on to do that lots of other movies in what they call their face replacement technique, including Captain America, Snow White and the Huntsman. The dwarves were often lit by computer-controlled LED lighting panels to match their faces onto the faces of the little people, so that they could have, Nick Frost and Ray Winston and Bob Hoskins playing shorter people, and their faces are lit exactly the right way to blend onto the makeup on the people who were actually on set. And even the Lone Ranger movie, the same year as Gravity, was also using the same LED-based system. But you need an iconic film that really, the actual production of the film hinges on being made possible by this technique. You couldn't imagine doing it any other way. And for example, the movie The Matrix, which is known very famously for the bullet time shots, this is also known as the time slice effect, or temps mort, as they called it in France. It's not actually the first movie to have the bullet time effect in it. There's two movies that came out before it, Wing Commander and Lost in Space, that both freeze time and then kind of move the camera as everybody's frozen and then start it back up again. And it had been done in TV commercials before. It had been invented, from what I can tell, by Tim McMillan in England in the 1980s, and he was actually part of one of those movies that came out before The Matrix. But it doesn't really get people's attention until there's a really great match between artistic expression, storytelling, visual narrative, and an effect that just is perfect for telling that story. And it all came together in the case of the LED lighting techniques in the movie Gravity. I think in the quest for photoreal faces that get past the uncanny valley, I think we've got another decade of really interesting research and development and experimental application and production applications of this. And I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an awesome time to be just in the field in general. Where we are now is, I think we've made a couple successful moon missions, and we've hung out on the other side of the uncanny valley for a little bit. We did this, briefly with the Digital Emily project. Digital Maine was over there quite a bit with Benjamin Button. But it feels like we always came back to Earth, and then we have to figure out how to get there again, and it's another huge experimental space shot in order to be able to do it. It's not a reliable production technique at this point. And until we have something where people just know it's going to be okay, and they're not like kind of just holding back, worried, I hope it's going to be good, and kind of, rooting for, I know that visual effects company, they've got a movie, they're going to try to do a photoreal face, and you're kind of rooting, I hope they nail it, and it's not going to be something that ends up embarrassing them. Gives them something I'll cheer about. We're going to see a couple of films like that finally in the next couple of years. Surprisingly, Benjamin Button was over 5 years ago now, and it's still the best use of a photoreal digital character in a movie. I think a lot of that is because David Fincher was in charge, and he knew how to use and manage the technology for doing that in a way that it never failed to serve what he was doing. And you have to be so careful using these things and making sure that the lighting is right and the expressions that you're putting on are correct. And letting the digital artists take advantage of the things they can do to try to make it look better, like allowing there to be flaws in the face is something that helps make it look more real. You don't want to take a digital character and then say, okay, we'll make them look perfect, because then they're probably going to look kind of creepy. I think that the world of video games is going to play just as much of a part in the quest for realistic digital faces, and we recently collaborated in my lab with Activision on a fellow called Digital Ira that I don't think is perfectly photoreal, but there's a lot of really nice things happening in his face. It's made from a bunch of very high-resolution light stage scans with 4K texture maps. As he animates, which is based on video performance capture, it blends in the maps of the neutral expression to the smile expression, and so all the surface normal and blood content changes that happen around your eyes and your cheeks when you smile actually appear in Digital Ira. And now we're working with Activision to do some more characters to get better hair, better faces, better correspondences between the scans. And since interactive entertainment fundamentally needs to have digital actors more than filmed entertainment does, because you don't know where the camera's going to be or exactly what the lighting might be. And eventually these digital characters are going to be able to think up new things to say and react to you intellectually, not just get into gunfights with you. You'll need to have digital characters that can say new things that you never literally recorded, and for this you definitely need to have photoreal CG faces. So I think video games are going to push photoreal faces just as much as anything in film over the next 10 years. I've had a great time at FMX here in 2014. It's been a really special conference, and as FMX has evolved, and I've gotten to be here a couple of times, it's really this perfect combination of a community. You almost feel a sense of family, that there's people that you've seen here before, but such an active effort to find and seek out anything cool happening in effects and animation and transmedia anywhere in the world, and welcome these people in and bring all of this other activity together. And it's this wonderful blend of everything cool that's happening, the thought leaders that, if something awesome happened in this world in any of these areas over the last year, it's very likely going to be here at FMX. I've seen a lot of that stuff.